Our Old Testament reading this morning is Psalm 92, verses 1 through 4. It is good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to your name, O Most High, to declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night, to the music of the lute and the harp, to the melody of the lyre. For you, O Lord, have made me glad by your work. At the works of your hands I sing joy. New Testament reading is Luke 6, verses 1 through 12. One Sabbath, while Jesus was going through some grain fields, his disciples plucked some heads of grain, rubbed them in their hands, and ate them. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.' On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and taught, and there was a man whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees were watching him to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath, so that they might find grounds to bring accusation against him. But he knew what they were thinking, and he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Come and stand in the middle.' He got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to him, 'I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it?' After looking around at all of them, he said to, 'Stretch out your hand.' He did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and began discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus." God bless the reading of this scripture in understanding and love.
Betty, thank you so much for reading today. You've been wondering, 5Ws, what is that all about? For those of you who are teachers, or for those of you who are journalists, or for those of you who like to write, the 5Ws are the 5 questions elementary school students learn in order to analyze a story. So we have the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. Easy questions. So if we were using these 5Ws for today's readings, 2 stories consecutive, which Betty just read to us, we come to the conclusion, who? Jesus and his disciples. What? Eat and heals. Where? On the field and in the synagogue. When? On the Sabbath. Why? Because the disciples are hungry and because Jesus has mercy. So what is the big deal, you might wonder? Well, these stories are in all 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, so they have some relevance, all of them. Both stories, and just in Luke, they happen to be after each other, back to back. So what is so upsetting about eating and healing? Let's just assume the disciples are hungry and not playing a prank, because that would be one thing. But just assume that they are hungry because they've been walking quite a bit, and so they eat whatever is in there. So you might say, well, they're stealing. Okay? Besides that, they may just help themselves. But I don't think it is about the eating. It is more about the when on the Sabbath. And the second story also, Jesus is in the synagogue like everybody else, like we hear this morning on a Sunday, and he heals somebody with a hand. And again, it is not about the healing itself, but about the Sabbath. Again, I am not here to say, oh, we are so much better. Look at us. We can heal whenever we want to. This is not the case. I am not saying don't want to say anything negative to our Jewish friends or forefathers who we are. And I think the problem lies somewhere different. Last Sunday, Pastor Susan mentioned it is sometimes easier to clean bathrooms than to preach. Today is one of those as well. I wish it would be a fuzzy story, makes you feel good on this great day, or we could talk about Groundhog, if he's coming or not coming, because after all, today is February 2. But here we have, similar to last week, a controversial story. Two stories. And the people who chose that story for today, so these stories were chosen many, many years ago, and we go through a cycle. And we try, as big theologian Karl Barth say, to have the Bible in one hand and the paper in the other. So what is so controversial about eating and healing? Again, Sabbath is important. Jesus was an observant Jew, so he went to the synagogue. That was very important for him as part of being in together and to worship God. And maybe you can say these laws then are similar to the blue laws which existed here when certain things were not allowed because it was a religious law. Like, did you know that in 1809, so 6 years after Ohio was made a state, it was not allowed, it was forbidden on a Sunday. Any sporting, any gambling, any hunting, and any quarreling, any horse racing, any shooting, and any common labor. Okay? Go on in history a little bit. Baseball became really popular in the mid-1800s. And so the law was adjusted to say baseball is allowed on a Sunday, but after noon on Sunday. Okay? We're trying to be very specific here. And so it was not a criminal offense anymore. Baseball, a criminal offense. We might not laugh about that, but that was the law in the mid-1800s. And all this went on till about 1973. Some of us might be old enough to remember when Sunday was only for church and family. No stores were open, and it was just what you did. I see some nodding. All this changed in November 1973. Okay? Even Westerville, where some of you living here in 2004 when Westerville decided not to be dry anymore, it was a Sunday law. After 70 years of being dry, that law got changed. And I have nothing against the law. Please don't get me wrong. I'm married to a lawyer. His father was a lawyer. My brother is a judge. My niece is a judge. My grandfather was a judge. So I really try to be in the law and keep the law. Because otherwise there will be a lot of familiar issues with that coming later. So I'm not saying anything about breaking the law. Please don't get me wrong. However, the gospel, in my opinion, is not here to go back to the 1950s. It is not about being nostalgic about the good old days, how wonderful everything was in the 1950s up to 1973, when everything was just like this was Sunday, church and family, and that was the West. Certain things you could do, and certain things you could not. In my opinion, after done some research and studies about it, this goes much deeper. Because the Sabbath is there to serve the people, and not us to serve the Sabbath. This is a religious law, and again, nothing against our Jewish sisters and the ancestors who came to us beforehand. This is not a separation because we are so much better than them. So please do not see it that way. But both our Jewish friends, together with us, our Christians, we are all about mercy and compassion to all people at all times, regardless if it is a Sunday or a Sabbath or whatever. And Jesus, even in the reading which Betty read to us, said, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, in verse 5. And then in verse 9, I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save life or to destroy it? And in Mark's version, it goes even so far that Jesus says, the Sabbath is made for human beings and not the human beings for the Sabbath. So, if we are to show mercy and compassion, because that is our religion for everyone at all times, this is a very nice, good, ethical question to ask in class. When, if it is ever unlawful to break a law? You can have wonderful essays about it, I am sure, college and up, or maybe even high school, and depending on which grade you're talking, maybe even middle school. When is it allowed? But this is not about laws in general. We are here as people of faith, so therefore we ask, what does our faith require of us? In history, people made those tough decisions. But what about here and now? On Thursday, a lot of us watched a documentary, which happened to be it's publicly available, about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he asked always the question, what does my faith, our faith, require of us? And again, coming back to the laws, I want to share some laws which I personally find kind of obscure in Ohio. I found these out, and please feel free to fact check me on that one. Number one is, did you know that it is unlawful to keep whales on Sunday? It is illegal in Ohio to keep whales on Sundays. Okay? It is also illegal to get fish drunk. Just saying. And another one, to eat donuts while walking backwards. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because it's not allowed. I haven't tried it yet, and I might just want to walk down State Street and eating a donut while walking backwards, but I do not want to disobey a law, so in case somebody was going to get me. Again, this is not about laws, civic laws. I'm talking about, what does our faith require? These might be all amusing, and we all know this is part of history. I do not know about the donuts eating backwards. Maybe there was an accident at some time. But our question is, what does it mean to be faithful at all times? Not only on a Sunday, but from Monday to Saturday. I also know that we have people here who are hurting, who are afraid right now. And so what is our responsibility towards those who are hurting, towards those who are afraid? What are we going to do as a faith family, individually and as a church? And the people are hurting and the people are afraid because of who they are. Not because they crossed any laws, but just because of who they are. What are we going to do about it? I don't have the answers for you. I wish I had. I wish I could make up laws just like that and say everybody has to obey A, B, C, and D, and E. And I believe at times like this, we all have to get together and discern for ourselves individually, but also as a community, what now? Similar to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer was doing, what does it mean to be merciful, compassionate in a world which is so divided? What is our Christian responsibility right now in this time. What is required of us? Not just to come to church on a Sunday morning, but how does our faith, our getting together, influence, affect our living throughout the week? Because Bonhoeffer said, church is truly the church when it serves and lives for others. Not just for our own little people, but how do we live and serve others? We in our welcoming statement say, we welcome all. We try to be a safe haven for people, especially for those who are hurting and who are living in fear. That might be difficult. So we need your help. We need your compassion. We need mercy in a world like this. Okay, we have the 5 questions: who, what, where, when, and why. In a couple of minutes, we are going to serve communion. Let us answer these questions. Who is invited? All are invited. What are we going to receive? Remembering Jesus' love, and eat and drink so that we can serve the world even better. When? Today and always when we serve it. Where? Here. And hopefully at other churches, at other places as well. And why? So that we are strengthened to share love with our neighbors, to worship God, and to love God and our neighbors as we do ourselves. And in a world that is so divided, I hope that this meal unites us as people of faith so that we can actually go out and show mercy and love all people unconditionally.